This episode of the podcast, we had Ben. This was a fantastic episode we had. We got really deep on just being human and our emotions. This was filmed back in April because over about a month there, I had a broken laptop, so I was unable to get podcasts out. But this was a fantastic episode though. But also make sure you check out all Ben's work. He has a new song out, Be Your Own King, which is I highly recommend listening to, and he's got a program out with songwriting, so be sure to check that out. I'll link all his stuff down below. And also as well, guys, I have Creating Your Legacy shirts out as well. So go to mitchellcrocker.com/shop to go check them out if you want, all that kind of stuff. And also on the 25th of July, I have my own workshop, Free the Body, Free the Mind, which that is up at the Sunny Coast. I will be taking this to a couple of other places as well. But to get all your tickets and more information about it, go to mitchellcrocker.com/workshop. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, guys.
Sick. Welcome to the show, Ben. How's your day going?
It's been going really good, man. It's lots of stuff's coming up. And just staying present with it and being with it has been challenging today. So, but I appreciate it. I appreciate it that's what my day looks like.
I fully understand that. I think it's been like that for a few people this week by looking at social media and that. And especially myself at the beginning of the week, as we were speaking about, it was like I had a lot of stuff show up. Then I had to actually sit with it because I guess with Queensland jumping into lockdown. So it's like, oh crap, I have nothing to extract myself anymore.
Dude, I really identify with that. And after coming out of the army 2 months ago, I really feel like only now I'm starting to fully embody that and fully sort of be with the things that maybe I haven't looked at, that have been put to the side and that have been kind of hidden under blankets and that I've kept from myself from a long time. And now I feel like I have a space to open them and explore them. And sometimes that's challenging. Sometimes that's hard. And I guess that I'm dealing with that at the moment, is that's been quite challenging for me now that I have the space to sort of open those can of worms and deal with the worms that are inside. It's been intense, but it's been amazing at the same time. So yeah.
100% understand that. Because when you're like sitting with your stuff, right, everyone like makes it, it's like, it is so beautiful in some, like in context, but you got to sit with that dark, yucky stuff before you actually get to see the light. And it's like one thing that a lot of people don't talk about. They're like, go on the healing journey, unpack everything. And then you're sitting there and you're just like, I'm just emotional all the time. And it's like, all this stuff's just coming up and it's like, I don't know what to do. And you're sitting with it and that. But then, in saying that, the kind of leads into my first question. Is like, where did this journey start for you, man? Where did you start unpacking this stuff or getting into the work?
I like that you said journey, because I really feel like it has been a journey. And I mean, I wrote the song and I first had my first experience of kind of like coming face to face with where my self-love was at Jason Blewett's Sharpen the Spear retreat. We did this breathwork session there and I was just like blown away by how mean I was to myself and how unkind I was to myself. It was just like, it was the first time, I don't know whether you've ever experienced it before, but when I sort of came face to face with that and like face to face with this, like with the devil or with this nasty thing. And I couldn't not see it anymore. And I was shocked. Like I was shocked the way that I treated myself. And so I guess that was the first time that I'd seen that. And ever since it has been a journey. It certainly hasn't been a one-time thing where it's like, that's all clear now. It's been like shedding layer after layer. And it's continuing to keep unfolding and continuing to happen.
Yeah, man, I definitely resonate with that because I had a big one in 2019, which I was like, I wish I did something that was facilitated with someone, because I probably would have understood it a bit better and had someone else translate it for me. Is that I went through a massive part of my life after breaking up with my ex-girlfriend, and it's like this whole realization of looking at my life and like, holy crap, and looking at how I've been treating myself, and then that's reflecting back onto others. And yeah, and I went this, I guess most people call it an ego death, a huge grieving stage for months of just like this part of myself that kind of just died. But then in that magic was kind of the birth, and this podcast, knew myself, and start that journey of self-love and self-discovery, self-happiness, and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's painful, but what's on the other side is incredible. But it's challenging at times to sit with that pain and to just kind of be with it, because the human body doesn't want to. It wants to cover it back up again. Like it wants to look behind that door and be like, oh, I don't want to go in there, and shut the door again. But it's really hard to keep the door open and just kind of be with it long enough for it to physically shift.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I also think it comes a lot down to social conditioning, because there's this phrase that I've come across. It's like the happiness trap, that thinking we have to be up here all the time. In actual fact is like, being a human is having emotions, and emotions kind of help us navigate the world. But we spend a lot of time suppressing the bad stuff, but that also suppresses the good stuff as well. So then a lot of time we sit, normally when you are suppressing stuff, you sit more in the in the quote unquote negative emotions, and you sit in the positive ones, which is something I've generally noticed with myself, especially over the last couple of years, is that when you are suppressing stuff, it's more you're sitting in that negative kind of state more than, you're getting the positive, and the positive ones you kind of want more. But then when you start unpacking it as well, is that a lot of the time is that, I guess, the stuff you don't want to feel come up a bit more. And then once you kind of unpack that stuff, that's when you get to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Or I shouldn't say at the end of the tunnel, because this thing is a massive journey. There's always constant unpacking.
Yeah, totally. It is a constant journey, and always unpacking. I really see that. I thought it was a destination for a long time as well, that there was just going to be this destination that I got to, that I would feel that self-acceptance and that self-love. But I see that it's going to be a constant journey to kind of keep shedding and keep unfurling the negative thoughts and the different stuff that I have that are limiting me. But I'm going to get more into the good stuff. And what I really hear and what you're sharing then is that I really tried to restrict my emotions as well, and that I tried to spend all the time in the high and spend no time in the low. And what I've found lately is that not to fight the wave, that the wave's going to keep coming up and down all the time, that it's just a human thing that we feel emotions in waves. And a lot of the time I would try and fight the wave. If I was down, I'd try and fight it back up again. And in fighting it back up again, I'd stay down for longer. And so just being able to be with that down feeling and be okay, and turn up to things, even turn up to different events and stuff, not high, not up, like not feeling great, but still turning up and still being with people where you're at, has been really powerful for me to be able to do that. And I've found that it's naturally come back up again way faster.
I definitely agree with that, man. Like when you do show up when you aren't feeling your best, when you continue doing the work when you aren't feeling best, and having that, I guess, going to events and having that community there, and then also talking up about it and speaking to other people, because you realize that you're kind of not the only one going through it at that time. And then it kind of helps to dissolve the ego and, I guess, the problem itself, and then it kind of uplifts you a bit more.
Yeah, 100%. And just being okay going in without the mask on, going out without the facade, because I think the facade stops that from happening. If you go in and you're like, okay, cool, I got to pump myself up, I got to be energetic, and I've got to be excited, and you put this facade on, then you go in there, no one gets to interact with like where you are actually at, and they just interact with the facade. And it means that you never sort of get to experience moving past the ego. And I really felt that at like a family event that we went to the other day, that I was kind of down that day. And we went to this event, and I just got to be there, and I just got to be with the people, and I experienced exactly what you're saying, that the ego just fell to the background, and I naturally came back up again. I naturally came back up into the space that was created from not putting the facade on.
Mm. And like I also noticed too, like by putting that facade on that mask is actually you waste so much more energy trying to do that. So then I guess when you are hanging around people and especially people you care about, you're putting so much effort in putting, I guess, not how you're feeling at the time and that, and you end up being exhausted and not as present with the people you're around.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, totally get that. And I really see that no one really gets to know you either when you put that smiley, happy face on all the time. That no one actually gets to know the real you. That they just get to know this version of yourself that you portray to the world. And I had a friend that's really dealing with some stuff at the moment, and I was talking to him about that. And he's had this real struggle when some things in his life really kind of all happened at once, and really was a hard time for him, that people weren't around to support him because he'd always shown up as the happy guy, the happy, like in like really out there guy that was like put the facade on, that was always this sort of person. And people would say to him, oh, I would do anything for you, I'll be there for you whenever you need. But like his life had this real challenge in it, and people weren't there. People only knew him as the facade, and they weren't there when he really needed it. So I really got something for myself in that the more that we can just show up as us, the more people feel connected to us, and they show up when you need them.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that because we tie our identities around this certain, part of ourselves, and then that's the only part of ourselves we show to the world. So the world actually,
Mm,
and as you're saying that, like the world doesn't get to see who we actually are. And I'll talk about from a male point of view because I do have a lot of mates that do the same thing, and I talk to them about it, and it's quite this thing that I guess as a male, it's like we don't show emotions, you don't show the crap stuff that's going on. I know this has a little bit to do with get a bit deep. It's like to do with the suicides, especially men 75% more likely than women to commit suicide, which is a huge
mm.
statistic difference. And it's because we're so scared to show up as our authentic self because we're so scared of getting judged. But to realize that I guess everyone around us are feeling the same thing. So when you show up vulnerably, they have that chance to let the wall down as well.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I really see that. And the more that you show up with your walls down, you are the permission slip then for people to show up with theirs down. But it really takes someone to do it first. And it takes a lot of guts to do that, to be the first one to show up with your walls down, because you really are opening yourself up to judgment. And I really see out in the world that there is judgment, there is criticism. And sometimes that's your experience. You take your wall down and you are judged and criticized. But it also doesn't mean anything. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do that. Most of the time, people won't judge and criticize you when your walls are down. They'll take their walls down as well, and they'll just have a real freaking conversation with you. And it's amazing.
Yeah, 100% with that. Um, yeah, I guess like one of my questions would be, because I would love to talk into this as well. It's like, how did it feel for yourself when you first started to show up vulnerably or as yourself in the moment?
For me personally, or through more music kind of channels.
Yourself, I'll go both
Yeah,
actually. Yeah, make it a
yeah,
two-part
yeah,
question.
totally. Yeah. I guess I really struggled with that initially, and mainly through high school, that I felt like I couldn't show up as just my genuine self, even through uni and stuff after school. And it wasn't really till I got a bit older in my 20s that I felt like I could really show up as just me. And I mean, even now I'm still shedding that, um, being able to fully show up authentically as me. But honestly, I really felt like I couldn't for a long time. I was like, that is not possible. To me, it didn't occur like you could actually just show up as your authentic self, because it wasn't enough. There was like some thing that was like, it doesn't fit in this box. It doesn't look like everyone else looks. And I had all of these reasons and these like self-judgments around why I couldn't do that. So I just didn't. I just decided that that's something that I couldn't do. And I always felt wondered why I felt so drained after like social interactions and stuff like that. I was like, I'm wiped after hanging out with people. And then I came up with the story that I didn't want to hang out with that many people, that I wanted to be on my own a lot. But it just meant that on my own, I didn't have to put up my wall or my facade or whatever version of that I was trying to do. So I did enjoy more time alone because I didn't feel like I needed to do that. But as I've been able to shed that now, I love spending time with people now, and it's way less effort. You just get to show up and you just get to be with people and communicate with people and be heard and seen and held and all of those amazing things that happen when you are with people. And it's not draining now. Now I feel lit up by being around people. And so it's been a real shift for me.
100% resonate with that, man. 100%. And I'm like, I'm really feeling into that. And I'm like, you do notice a difference, like, because I still do it now with, like, depending on the environment and that, I still put that mask on, and I notice a difference in myself and my energy levels. And when I don't put the mask on, like, I'm so much more vibrant. I'm not, holding myself back. And yeah, and it's like when you are putting those masks on, it's so draining.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and I even had an experience like that when I first joined the army. And I was going through officer training, because they're very specific about the type of person that you need to be. They're like, an army officer is this. And then it was like they went through and they're like, is outgoing, is intense, is it? And they went through this whole list of like things that you needed to be. And I remember like looking at the examples of that and through other people and being like, that's not me. I can't be that. And then judging myself and then deciding that I had to turn myself into that to pass the course and to pass officer training, but also just to be accepted by the people that I was with. And so I found like the 18 months of army officer training really draining and really intense. And I found the first couple of years of being an army officer really draining and really intense, because I was pretending to be someone that I wasn't. And eventually I worked out that I was just as effective just being myself, as like actually even more effective being myself than I was when I was pretending to be this other person. And people know, I was like, the soldiers knew, like the soldiers that were under my command and stuff knew that I wasn't being my true authentic self. And the way that I communicated with them didn't translate as well as when I just was myself. And they wanted to be on board by that, and they wanted to be led by that, and they wanted to be supported, and everything was just way more streamlined. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely understandable, man. And it's like, yeah, it's like when you start showing up with your authentic self, it's amazing what comes about, because it's like people actually see who you are, and majority of the time they like you better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, another question is like, when did you come to that realization?
Yeah. In the army.
Yeah, in the army, sorry.
Yeah. It took me a couple of years because the blueprint was so strong, and how they kind of expected you to be. It took me a long time to be comfortable trying something different, because it's like a formula that they'd set out, and I understand why it is, because yeah, it's just the way that I thought that it was, and to me there wasn't any other option to be a different way. But when I found that just being me had like way more charisma and like way more flexibility, and I think because I started to do, I wasn't able to maintain the facade anymore. I just got to the point I was just like, this is too hard. So I started to shed it and I started to let it go. And as I started to do that, I started to get better results, and I started to connect with people more, and I started to be better at my job, and I started to see all of these things sort of, like you're saying, just show up and present themselves. And I'm like, wow, this is actually like working for me better. And so I just like started shifting into just being myself again. And yeah, it was a long process, and it took me like a surprisingly long amount of time to find out that that was the way that I should be operating.
Yeah, it definitely is. And sometimes it's hard too, especially we don't have, I guess, a role model for that either. So it's like, oh, okay, like, it's the truth, but because there's no role model right there, it's like harder to step into it.
Oh man,
And
I love that. Yeah, exactly. And like the officers and stuff that they had as role models when we went through training, a lot of them I didn't really identify with. I'm like, I can't relate to that guy. I can't see any of myself in that guy. And it wasn't until I got out there in the real world and sort of found my mentors that I
yeah.
found that there was another way to be. So I really like, I hear what you're saying there.
Mm. So yeah, with that question, jumping onto that question too, man, when did you start finding into your mentors, and what are some of the best things that you've learned from them?
Um, that it's I learned that it was okay to be yourself in those roles, and that there's alternatives ways of being, because I was so convinced that there was only one way of being. There was a right and wrong. It was like a yes or no type question. But what I learned from those role models in those times was that it was open to free choice, and it is open to you, and it is your personal way that you express it. You can be fully expressed um, in in that role and in that job, as much as I didn't think that you could be, that you could. And so they really opened the door to me being able to fully express and actually let myself come through. That was the main lesson that I learned from them.
That's awesome. So yeah, man. So I know that you just recently just released a song.
Yeah,
It's like "Be Your Own King."
yeah.
Yeah, which I think that's an amazing title. So whereabouts did that come about, man? And where did this, I guess, the idea spark from there?
So the idea actually came from that course that I was talking about before, Sharpen the Spear, the one that Jason Blewett facilitated, and it came from that breathwork session when I got fully confronted by how unkind I was to myself. And I really couldn't unsee that. I couldn't unsee how unkind I'd been to myself for the majority of my life. And once I got confronted by that, and once it was right there, I was like, whoa. And so I really had to take myself on from that point. And it sort of started to be able to raise the question for myself: what would it be like if I could be my own king, if I could treat myself with sovereignty, if I could love myself, if I could be in service of myself, if I could do all those things that we normally associate with other people. And I really saw that that's what I was doing for other people, but everyone but myself. And so the song kind of came out of the question: what if I could be my own king, or what if other people could be their own kings as well, and look after themselves, and find their self-acceptance and find their self-love. And um, I guess as soon as I started working on it, it was just kind of there. The concept was so strong, and the idea was so strong for me personally after finding it for themselves and for myself, that I wanted it to communicate it, and I wanted it to be a space for other people to find their version of that as well. So it just kind of wrote itself, and it was created out into the world. And I was just so committed to it as well, because I was like, I can't not write this. And everyone that I shared it with really got something from it. So I was like, I can't let this stay on my hard drive, on my computer, as a couple of chords and a couple of melody that I'd never finish. I was like, I have to finish this thing. And so I did whatever it was going to take to complete it. And I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah, it's awesome that you've brung it out to the world instead of, letting that resistance hold you back, and it's even better that it's in music form as well. Because at the end of the day, most people say this, like, especially with myself, I do it in video form or like written form, but you did it in music form. So then it actually, because music's such a powerful tool, right, to bring up emotions and that, and bring up like thoughts about it. And it will also, like, listening to it in a song will help people to step in, like, bring that thought process to themselves. Hey, maybe I do need to, like, love myself better. How am I treating others? Why am I treating myself this way? And stepping into, being their own king. Because at the end of the day, who doesn't want to be their own king? Who doesn't want to have self-love? Because when you have self-love, it starts reflecting onto others, and it betters your relationship with not just yourself, the world as well.
Oh man, I really hear that. The more that I've been able to love myself, I've seen the more that people around me are able to love themselves as well, and fully accept all of themselves, and it just spreads. It's just like a ripple effect. And I guess I'd always kind of felt the opposite. I felt that it didn't really matter if I was self-critical of myself, or it didn't really matter if I judged myself, that wasn't affecting anyone. But I really see now that it is, that your internal dialogue, if you're critical of yourself and you don't truly love yourself, then that has effects on other people because you're negative about yourself, and then you communicate that to others and an open space for them to be critical about themselves. But if you just love yourself and you're fully acceptant of yourself, then it creates a space for other people to be that for themselves as well. And then it just kind of spreads out in this amazing way.
Yeah, you're so right with that. It is crazy how much when you start loving yourself and you start noticing, like, even myself over the last couple of months with some of my like personal relationships and how much better they're becoming. And like one of the things that I lacked like early on was communication. And the more that I've started to love myself, the less I'm holding back around things. I'm starting to communicate more with people and actually showing up with more empathy in my like communications around people. So then it doesn't turn into, say, an argument, or it's not that I'm projecting out. It's like, okay, I can understand where you're coming from as well, because, you know, you have this self-love for yourself and empathy for yourself as well.
Oh, dude, that's amazing. Yeah, acceptance of yourself translates into acceptance of others. I really heard that in what you just shared then, and that's incredible.
Yeah, definitely, man. So, like, how has the self-love journey actually affected your intimate relationship? It's a good question I like to ask.
Yeah, definitely. In exactly the way that you just described, and the more that I've been able to love myself and accept different parts of myself, the stronger and more intimate my relationship has been with my partner. I really see that back when I had a lot of critical thoughts of myself and that I was really unkind, that I was always on a hair trigger to be reactive, to be standoffish, to like be unkind, to be like that. All of those things were like just under the surface, whereas now I feel like they're not the landmines that I experienced them to be in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true, because it's like especially in the past, you don't realize till later on, a lot of those landmines you're talking about has a lot to do with yourself, but then
Yeah.
you're just projecting it out and you're unrealizing that in the moment, and then you do self-reflecting. It's like, wait, that trigger had a lot to do with myself and not actually what's going on in reality.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's quite challenging to do at the start, is to fully accept that those things are your own stuff that you're projecting out. But I think there's power in that as well. And when you're willing to step up to the plate and be like, no, that was my stuff, and then deal with it, the things that you find on the other side of that are incredible, for yourself and for other people as well.
100%. And even like when you start accepting that that's a part of you, or like that was your trigger, and you start having this massive weight off your shoulders because you realize it's your responsibility. And it's like, when it comes to my responsibility, I'm the one that can change it.
Yeah.
And instead of relying on everyone else trying to change the world around me, it's like I can change my internal world, which reflects onto the outer world.
Oh, dude, I love that. Yeah. And I felt like that when I first got that, there was only one person that could make me feel guilty, and that was me, because you can't actually ever make anyone else feel guilty. Like, even if you try and make someone feel guilty, you can't force them to. And what the power that I found in that is that when I noticed that I felt guilty about something, that I could shift it myself, I could be like, I can give myself freedom around that, and I don't need to beat myself up about that anymore. And then this weight just lifts, and I was like, wow, I've been running around feeling like this guilt is like someone else's problems and someone else is doing this to me, but it was me doing that to me. And when I found that, then you know that you've got your own solution. The solution is yours, and you can use it on yourself, and it's really freeing.
100%, man. And that's why I love this quote. It's like, it's like, when a trigger shows up, it's a sign for a new level of freedom, or gives you an opportunity for a new level of freedom. And it's pretty much as you explained what just then. It's like, we're all chasing this thing for freedom, but then it's these triggers that are kind of holding us back from them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really hard to like not see a trigger as a negative. not see something that you are highly reactive about and be like, and accepting it, being like, that's mine. Because you don't want to accept stuff like that. You don't want to be like vindictive, and you don't want to be unkind, and you don't want to be all those things that we normally associate with negative stuff. To actually hold on to that and say, no, I am those things, is really challenging. But when you do, when you own them, and when you are able to accept them and then shift them, like, that's when everything opens up. And yeah, I really hear in what you're sharing that that's something that you've taken on board as well.
Mm. And like, I think one important part to point out with that too is like how scary it is, bloody scary facing your own shit, because it's like it's you against you, and it's
Yeah.
like you're gonna have to let some parts of yourself die to rebirth that new part of you that's gonna make yourself feel so much lighter.
Yeah. Yeah, that shedding stuff is painful. And I mean, like, I really have been feeling that over the last kind of week, and still kind of today, I really feel like I'm dealing with that today. But I've really have appreciated this conversation with you, because I feel so much more lightness and freedom and joy around that. I really am able to look at it as an opportunity and as something that's great now, kind of after talking to you and hearing your perspectives about seeing triggers as great things. Like, yeah, so thank you.
More than welcome, man. And it's like, a massive thank you on this side too, because it's like, feeling human again. And it's like, oh, someone else is going through the same things I'm going through. And that, which like, I think is, like, this conversation is so important for people to, like, everyone to listen to. Is like, this stuff comes up for everyone. We're not the only ones in the world that go through different scenarios, or have different triggers come up. They're generally the same thing. We just deal with them in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got our old band-aid solutions that we try and run over those things. And whether it's like slamming the door and leaving, or whether it's getting angry, or whether it's like we have all of those things that we've just tried to remedy these things with in the past, and they just look different for different people. Some people get loud, some people get quiet, some people get aggressive, some people get withdrawn. Like, it's just your flavor of how you've learned to deal with it. But yeah, by actually sort of identifying it and really properly dealing with it, not just putting the band-aid solution, is the only time you really get to explore what it could be if that wasn't part of your life.
100% agree. And I think that's one thing as a society, I think we need to start pivoting on, is that band-aid solution, because we're witnessing, even at the moment, it doesn't work.
Mm.
Like, we're lucky enough, we can see it. We're starting to see it on a global scale. And we've at a time now, we got that chance to pivot with the direction we're going in, because the quick fix pill, the band-aid solutions just aren't working anymore. And we can see that because, like, as I like to think, like I talk about with emotions, and that is that emotions are somewhat like water. The more you try and push it down, the harder they push up, because water's going to always try and escape.
Yeah, I really feel that as well. And that's been coming up in my life over the last couple of weeks as well, is like the masculine trying to resist stuff, trying to push back and trying to punch and force and like hit and like and run and like bend things, and it doesn't always work. What I'm starting to see is that we can bring like more nuance, bring subtlety, bring all of those things that we more associate with the feminine to problems. And some of the time when you bring that to them, it doesn't become a problem at all, because you don't aggravate it, you don't intensify it, it doesn't become this thing that you need to fight against, because it wasn't really a problem anyway. You just brought all of this energy to it. And so I've been finding that for myself, and trying to bring that, because I notice that it's not always natural to me, especially after being in that masculine, intense place of the army, where you just like beat your way through something. You just decide you want to do it, and then you just fight until you get to do it. I'm starting to see that doesn't always work, and that you can bring more flow and intuition, and you can bring more of those things to a problem and still have a great end result.
100%, because we generally do, like male or female, have feminine and masculine energy in us, and
Mm.
we get taught how to deal with things in one way or another. But then it's also becoming aware of how to deal with that problem in the moment. So that's when you become more self-aware and that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think also like being able to step into that more feminine energy when problems do come up, and coming more of that nurturing type is kind of better instead of beating yourself up. Because as we're saying, like with the world, it's always a war against something, because the world's in like hyper masculine energy. So it's always war against cancer and all that. And it's like, what if we actually took a step back and learn how to coexist with it? It's a part of us, and start to like nurture it and realize this is a part, like, as I was saying, it is a part of us. What if we can show it love instead of trying to fight it to death? What if we can like love it and it becomes a part of
Wow.
us?
Dude, imagine that world. Hey, holy shit, that'd be a different place if
Mm,
we could bring that sort of energy. Because I hear that we're always fighting something, and just the current flavor at the moment's COVID, but it's transitioned through so many different things over time. And we just go from fighting one thing to fighting the next thing. And who knows what the next thing will be. But even climate change, we're trying to fight that at the moment. But yeah, what if there was more love and acceptance in the world? Would we need to fight it? Like, I don't know.
I definitely agree with that, man, because it's like one of the most important pillars of change, especially I've noticed on my journey and spoken to other people, it's accepting where you're at instead of being at war where you're at. It's like, okay, this is where we're at. When do we, accept it? And then we can start looking at loving ways instead of trying to, as we're talking about, bash our way through.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes that's challenging as well, is accepting where you're at, because potentially it's not where you want to be. And we always have this idea that we want to be somewhere different. But yeah, just loving where you are at the moment. And that's been coming up a lot in my life as well, is that I have goals and I have things that I want
Cutting out. Still there?
to get back.
Yep, all good.
Yeah,
Internet kind
yeah,
of.
cool.
Sorry. Yeah, that's all good, man.
No, that's all right, man. Yeah, no, I fully get that. Being able to just accept where you are at the moment. And as humans, we always want to be somewhere different. We always have goals and things that we're striving for, and different places that we're trying to get to. And sometimes it's really challenging to fully be present in where you are at the moment. And yeah, again, it's like dealing with those internal dialogues. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's hard to just be where you are at the moment, because it's not ideally where you'd like to be. But there's also a heap of power and a heap of excitement in the present as well. And I'm starting to find that for myself.
I relate to that so much, man, because it's like, even I'm at a stage in my life where I guess there's a few things in my present moment I'm not entirely, I guess, happy with. But then because I'm seeing the ball start to roll with things, and I'm like, okay, when's this moment? But then I realize trying to live in the future is exhausting, and
Mm.
how to have more energy and be, I guess, have more self-love. And that is being more present in the moment, accepting where I am. And that kind of helps to move you. I guess it's this weird kind of dialogue. It's like being more present actually helps you to move forward quicker.
Oh, totally. Yeah, 100%. Because yeah, you only ever create like future possibilities, and you create things in the now. Like even when you project things in the future and you set goals and stuff like that, like you don't get the body you want in the future. You get the body with the work that you put in now. And so I really see that. And I see that I used to spend a lot of time in the future and a lot of time in the past as well, because I used to be so anxious about things that were happening in the future that I'd have if I had a given presentation or I had to do a certain thing. I was so worried, and I'd spend weeks worrying about this thing that was in the future. And I also used to spend so much time in the past as well, with like past failures and past things that are experiences and stuff that I felt like I'd failed and been judged around. And I just used to find that I'd like live at each end, and that I wouldn't spend much time in the center. And like my progress was so slow. I really hear that. And I see that in what you're sharing, that like the more time you can spend here in the now, like the more effective you are, and the more opportunity you have to create an amazing future for yourself.
Exactly right. So right with that, man. Loving the conversation, but I think I'll wrap it up on this question, man.
No worries, dude.
What is the legacy you want to create?
I really want to create the legacy of self-love and self-acceptance, and I just really want to open the space to people to look after themselves, because I really never knew that that was an option. I always felt that my actions, whenever I looked after myself, had the label of that I was what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, man.
That's so good.
Yeah, I've just totally blanked on the word. What's the word when we're just looking after ourselves?
Selfishness? Selfish?
Yeah, 100%, man. My experience was that looking after yourself was selfish, and that wasn't something that you should do. And I didn't know that there was this other possibility of being able to look after yourself that was actually looking after others, that was actually able to expand and able to be passed on to other people. And the more that you looked after yourself, the more that you cared for your needs, the more other people could care for their needs, and the more that you could care for their needs, and that it expanded out. And so I spent a lot of my time not looking after myself because I didn't want to be those things. And now I see that it's possible to be all of that, to have acceptance and love for myself, and that I can allow other people to have acceptance and love for themselves as well.
Such a powerful share, man. Like, I definitely resonate with that a lot. And it's definitely something needed. And we need more people to be that permission piece to take care of themselves. And yeah, like, thank you again for coming on this podcast, man. This has actually been really therapeutical for me as well. Like, it's like sitting out, it's like, yeah. But thanks again, man. Very much appreciated.
No worries, dude. Thanks for having me. And yeah, what an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed that.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in today's episode, guys. Be sure to give it a like, comment, let us know what you think. If you think a friend would value it, share it with them. And also, too, to help support the podcast a little extra bit, go to patreon.com/studio mindfulness. And to check out all my programs and all the other content I have going on, go to mitchellcrocker.com. That has all my social media links and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, hope you enjoyed today's episode. Cheers for tuning in too.